Hello everyone. Now we would be doing what? Very fast and quickly revising accounts and records chapter. So who is required to maintain accounts and records? Every registered person. Where? At his principal place of business. So every registered person at his principal place of business has to maintain accounts and records. But if there are more than one place of business, then accounts relating to each place shall be kept at that place. If the documents or books of accounts are found at any other premises, then it will be deemed that it will be maintained by registered person. And can you make it in electronic form? Yes, books of accounts can be maintained in electronic form. So this is what who is required to maintain accounts and records and at which place. Now, what are the types of accounts and records? So every registered person shall maintain what? The books of accounts relating to production or manufacture of goods, inward and outward supply of goods or service or both, stock of goods, ITC which is availed, output tax payable, okay, ITC availed, output tax payable. So production, manufacture, inward, outward supply, stock of goods, ITC availed, and output tax payable. So every registered person has to maintain the following books of accounts, What are the records which are prescribed by rules? So the goods or services imported or exported. The records which are prescribed by rules are the goods or services which are imported or exported. Then supply attracting payment on RCM basis along with the relevant documents, that is bill of supply, delivery challan, credit note, debit note, receipt, voucher. So all these documents we have seen in tax invoice chapter already. So you have to maintain these documents. Then separate account of advance received, advance paid, adjustments made thereon. You have to maintain all these records. Now, in case of different specific persons, different records are given. Like for example, what are the records to be maintained by agent, then manufacturer, then supplier of service, then work contract service. Important also work contract service. They ask many times. Then what are the records not to be maintained by the person for composition levy? This is also given. Records to be maintained by operator of the go down warehouse or the transporter. So these all things are given. So we will quickly see all these. Okay. So the records which are to be maintained by specific persons. Records, particulars of authorization received by him from each principal to receive or supply goods or services on behalf of the principal separately. So what are the, in case of agent, what we are doing? Agent. What records are to be maintained by agent? Whatever is the authorization he must have received authorization from all the principals, different principals. So he has to maintain records for the authorization. Whatever is the authorization received by him from each principal, for what? Either to receive or to supply goods or services on behalf of principal, or to receive or to supply goods or services on behalf of principal. So what he has to maintain? First, authorization received from each principal to receive or supply goods or services on that behalf. Next, particulars including description, value and quantity. What? Particulars including description, value and quantity of goods or services received on behalf of principal. What he has to maintain? Description, value or quantity of the goods received on behalf of principal. Then description, value and quantity, particulars including description, value and quantity of goods or services supplied. Okay, so the second point, goods received, goods or services received. Third point, goods or services supplied on behalf of every principal. Then details of account furnished to every principal. What is this? Detail of accounts which are furnished to every principal. So details of accounts furnished to every principal would be also what? Would also come here. Whatever is the account he is furnishing to the principal, he has to maintain that also. Then tax on receipt or supply of goods or services effected on behalf of the principal. What he has to maintain? The tax on the receipt or on supply of goods or services effected on behalf of the principal. Okay, so that whatever is the tax paid on receipt or supply, whatever is the tax paid on receipt or supply of the goods or services effected on behalf of the principal, he has to maintain that also. What? Tax paid on receipt or supply of goods or services effect on the whatever is the tax paid, he has to maintain records of these things also. So 5 things he has to maintain. What? Authorization received by the principal, then the goods received, description, value, quantity, then the goods supplied, good description, value, quantity, then the details of account furnished to the principal, and the tax paid on receipt or supply, and the tax paid on receipt and supply. So these are the 5 records which are to be maintained by the agent, Then next is records to be maintained by the manufacturer. What are the records to be maintained by the manufacturer? Monthly production account. What they have to maintain? Monthly production account showing quantitative details of raw material or services used in the manufacture. Showing quantitative details of what? Raw material or services used in the manufacture, and quantitative details of the goods so manufactured, including by waste and byproduct thereof. So what he has to maintain? He has to maintain monthly production accounts. He has to maintain what? Monthly production accounts. What? Showing quantitative details of raw material, services which is used in the manufacture, and quantitative details of the goods so manufactured, including waste and byproduct thereof. Okay, so he has to maintain the monthly production accounts showing quantitative details of raw material or services which is used in the manufacture of the goods or services, including waste and byproduct thereof. Then what are the records to be maintained by supplier of service? He has to maintain again the quantitative details of the goods which are being used in the provision of services. Details of ITC utilized and the services supplied. 3 things. What? The quantitative details of the goods which are used in the provision of services first. Second, details of ITC, details of input services utilized, and third is services supplied. Okay. So these are the records which are to be maintained by the supplier of services. Then what are the records to be maintained by supplier of work contract service? In case of work contract service, what are the records to be maintained? Name and the address of the person on whose behalf work contract is executed. Okay, so the name and address of the person on whose behalf work contract is executed. Then on whose behalf you are executing the work contract, you have to maintain name and address of that person. 1. Second, description, value, quantity of goods or services received for execution of work contract. For executing the work contract, you must be receiving the goods or the services, so the description, value and quantity of that. Then description, value, quantity of the goods or services which are utilized in the execution of work contract. You have to maintain what in the execution of work contract? Description, value and quantity. Then the details of the payment which is received in respect of each work contract. The payment which you are receiving in respect of each work contract, that you have to maintain. The name and address of the supplier from whom he has received the goods or services, and from whom you are receiving the goods or services, the name and address of those suppliers. So what you have to maintain in case of work contract, many a times they ask you in the exam. So the name, address of the person on whose behalf you are executing the work contract first. Second, description, value, quantity of the goods or services received for the work contract. Third, description, value and quantity of the goods or services utilized in the execution of work contract. Fourth, details of payment received in respect of work contract. And fifth, the name, address of the supplier from whom you have received the goods or services. Name and address of the supplier from whom you have received the goods or service. Okay, so these are the records which are to be maintained by the supplier of the work contract service, Then records which are not to be maintained by the supplier opting for composition levy. Now, what are the records which are not to be maintained by supplier opting for composition levy? Records which are not to be maintained by the supplier of composition, not to be maintained. In this case, what they have given? Not to be maintained. So, the composition taxpayer has not to maintain stock of goods and details of taxes. So, he need not maintain accounts of stock in respect of goods received or supplied by him. And such account shall contain particulars of opening balance, receipt, supply, goods lost, stolen, destroy, return of, disposed of by way of gift or free sample, and the balance of the stock including raw material, finished goods, scrap, waste, all these he need not maintain. The stock details he need not maintain. Second, tax details also he need not maintain. Account containing details of tax payable, tax collected, paid, input tax credit claim together with the register of tax invoice, credit note, debit note, delivery challan issued or received during the period. So he need not maintain all these things. Okay. Next, records which are to be maintained by owner or operator of the godown, warehouse and the transporter. So if you are a transporter or you are a owner or operator of the godown or warehouse, then in that case what records you are required to maintain. So if you are a person engaged in business of transporting goods, then what records you have to maintain? You have to maintain records of goods transported, delivered and the goods stored. What goods transported, delivered or the goods stored in transit by him, along with GSTIN of the registered consignor, consignee, along with GSTIN of the registered consignor or consignee in respect of each of the branches. Second, if you are the owner of or the operator of the warehouse or the godown, shall maintain books of accounts with respect to the period for which particular goods remain in the warehouse, including the particulars relating to dispatch, movement, receipt and disposal of the goods. So if you are a owner or operator of warehouse or godown, then what records you have to maintain? You have to maintain the records with respect to the period for which the goods are remaining in your warehouse, including particulars relating to what dispatch, relating to movement, receipt, disposal, all these records you have to maintain. So sometimes they'll ask you short note about all these. Any of these they can ask you. Generally they ask about agent, this work contract service and composition dealer, which records are not to be required in case of composition dealer. So this is generally many a times they ask you. And last, failure to maintain accounts. If you fail to maintain accounts, then what will happen, we'll see. So where the registered person fails to account for the goods or services, the proper officer will determine whatever is the tax payable, he will determine of the goods or services that are not accounted for, and the provision of 73-74 for determination of tax will apply. So officer will determine what the tax payable and the provision of 73-74 will apply. And the last in this chapter now, next and last in this, period of retention of account. Every registered person shall maintain account for 72 months. You have to maintain accounts for 72 months, that is 6 years from the due date of furnishing annual return. So for example, for 24-25, the due date of furnishing annual return is what? 31st of December 25. So 6 years from here, that means 31st of December 2031, you have to maintain the records till this time. You have to maintain the records pertaining to 24-25 till 31st of December 2031. So you have to maintain the records for 72 months from the due date of furnishing the annual return. But if you are a registered person who is a party to appeal shall maintain a records for a period of 1 year after the final disposal of appeal. 1 year after the final disposal of appeal or revision or proceedings, whatever, or 72 months, whichever is later. So in case of appeal, 72 months, or what, 1 year from the disposal of the appeal, whichever is later. You have to maintain the accounts and records, whatever the prescribed accounts and records till that time. Okay, so this is a very small chapter. If at all the question comes, it will come either on the period of retention of accounts or any of the records. They can ask you what records are to be maintained by those specific persons. Okay, so we'll stop our discussion for this chapter. Thank you for now.